The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. You can check out all of our content at cesnrg.com/podcasts. Today on the Solar Podcast, reducing electric load with DC lighting. My guest today is the founder and CEO of LumenCache. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
We all want a battery in our basement or garage, especially in light of the epic grid fail in Texas a few weeks ago. And let's face it, a tiny fraction of us globally have that, maybe more in the less developed world. But tell us about yourself. How did you get interested in DC lighting of all things? And also, how did you come to China? So there's a lot of interesting background here that I want to get into early in the episode. So give our listeners some background on yourself, please, Derek.
Oh, sure, sure. So actually, my background is in building automation and controls. I started in 1988. My first job was a simple one. I ran a 50 building campus for pharmaceutical production and research. So I kind of got, hit with this amazing group of people in a wonderful environment. We had, pharmaceuticals have money. So I had money, intellect, and with my strong computer background that I had as a very young person, combined with a mechanical engineering degree from college, just fell into this perfect opportunity for building automation systems. And it was right at the time where pneumatic controls were being switched over to DDC, direct digital controls. So almost all of my background was around this smart building systems, far ahead of what most people were doing in the industry for decades, actually. And in that experience, the idea for LumenCache was a smarter infrastructure, but at the time it wasn't possible. LED lights, I had read something 20 years ago that said LED lights would theoretically reach 140 lumens per watt. That was theoretical, right? And and now, I mean, we can get chips that are 230 lumens per watt, just commodity parts.
Mm.
So it's really exceeded it, but that kind of gave the spark for saying, we can do this over the data wires pretty easily. And by incorporating the communications, you're merging the controls into the most prevalent device that's in every building. Every building needs lights. So it's kind of an interesting background how I moved from the control sides of things into lighting. And actually, what's fun is that LumenCache isn't really a lighting system. It is. It's a DC power and control platform that happens to do lighting really well.
And just so our listeners understand, you mentioned communication cable. So you're talking about Cat5 cable powering lighting. When I look inside a Cat5 cable, I see these amazingly skinny little copper wires, right?
Yeah.
And is that truly enough wire for uh to handle lighting? And yeah, just lay that out for me.
Sure, sure. Well, maybe think of it in terms of how do grids connect together? So the major grids, for example, they connect together using HVDC, high voltage DC. Those wires are not very big. They're smaller sometimes than the big AC wires that you've seen, big high tension wires. And they're, 1.5 million volts, but it's relatively low current. So the same thing applies when you get on the smallest end of the scale, down at the loads, because we're only putting 300 milliamps of current across those wires. It's actually more than enough cross section to do it. And there was a funny LinkedIn conversation that some friends and I in the industry had just in the last couple of days, because one of the guys, and these are controls people too, but he started off saying, did you know that copper is going to be $9,000 per ton currently? And he goes, your system, Derek, should be using a lot less copper. So I did the math and I said, okay, we actually run 2 times the length of wires. So a typical US home, there's 1.7 million new homes expected in the US this year. And with some stimulus packages too, they're going to start more homes. Each home is about 2,000 feet of Romex typically. So 14.2 Romex, 14 gauge with the ground. And so you do the math and you figure, well, that's three conductors at 14 gauge for about 2,000 feet. Let's say 60% of that is for lights. And then you do the eight small conductors, like you said, for the Cat 5, but it's actually a reduction of about 30%, even though we're running twice the amount of wire. So it turns out to be almost a $300 million savings just in the raw copper alone.
$300 million savings for what market are
Just,
you referring
just in the
to?
copper cost. In other words, if you were to use the 1.7 million new homes in the US,
Okay.
we're twice as long. The wire is we use twice as long wire in each home. It's like, 2,000 feet of Romex, and it would be about 4,000 feet of Cat 5 for LumenCache. But because the wires are so much smaller, like you said, the copper is quite a bit less. And so the cost is overall, it was like a 30% savings. It was huge. I mean, as far as the amount of mining that's required and all the other expense and
Yeah.
environmental impact of all the copper, it's huge.
Yeah. I like that. I like a life cycle analysis of these problems, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, we talk a lot about peak oil in the energy industries, right? And um, but there's peak oil is not the only thing that we're peaking on, right? And it's not the only thing that has an environmental footprint. And all kinds of mining has a footprint. It has risks and rewards, and um, so if you can mine less stuff out of the earth, you're headed in the right direction.
And
Now,
just look at the demand, right? You've got all these electric cars that are coming out. I mean, there's some really big consumers of energy that need
yes,
copper. And so when we look very holistically at the nature of different problems in the industry, I mean, I get a lot of people who look at LumenCache and they're like, duh, that's so obvious. Like LED lights draw a tiny fraction. Like I was always frustrated. Why are we putting so much heavy copper up there? Because they don't use nearly the current that circuit would require for AC. And so it just makes a lot of sense. And now you look at the bigger load in the world and we say, yeah, we're much better off applying that copper and savings to keeping the price of an electric vehicle down versus wasting it, sticking it in a building for 50 years, before it's recovered.
yep, yep. So let's backtrack a little bit though. You started in building automation with Rockwell, and you're also a serial entrepreneur. What what is it about, this DC lighting opportunity that really grabbed you, and tell us about the company, because it the configuration is a little unusual, um, not unheard of. I'm meeting more and more Americans who are living in China, but tell us more about the ideation for the company, and where are you in your trajectory in terms of bringing product to market?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we're just about to have our first distributor summit. We've got a distributor on board up in British Columbia, another one in Indianapolis signed on. So we've got a couple more. We want to get them out across the country. The majority of our sales is in US, Canada, Mexico. I have one installation here in Zhuhai, China, but China's a whole different story. I mean, the economy here is growing so quickly. It's a platform that the technology isn't actually that complex, but the business model of getting it rolled out is more valuable. Like we don't want to disrupt the value chain that distributors, electricians, et cetera, add to this type of infrastructure. So I've seen a lot of other, past, I'm going to call them competitors, but many of them are gone already, that really didn't apply the right business model. They had a good product, they had the right ideas, but this really requires a lot of cooperation. The uniqueness of LumenCache isn't that it's a DC lighting system. The uniqueness and the patent in it is the fact that we can change the type of technology for the power needed for each port by plugging in a little module. So for example, we'll do a visual aid for your people watching, but this tiny thing here is a 30-watt DC-DC driver. And this little thing, if this was an AC-DC driver, it would be almost 4 times the size. And it just plugs into the backplane, and this particular one creates constant current that is the simplest form of energy that you would send to an LED chip in a light. Because every light bulb, every LED light bulb, I don't know if your viewers know, but everyone needs two pieces. There's the driver and there's the LED chip. And those two pieces have to go together. For other types of devices, maybe it just needs a constant voltage, like if you were plugging in a USB outlet or other kinds of like a TV or something that needs 19 volts. And so there's a different little module to plug in for that kind of load. So this is a constant voltage driver. And the point is that it's technology agnostic. So in future generations, we'll also have PoE and any of the versions of PoE and whatever other technology might come out in the future. So it's really future proofing the building. And we're doing that for a bunch of reasons. In my experience, when I did the building automation systems, it was always frustrating to have an old system that you're basically waiting to die, right? You want that system to be maintained enough so that the tenants are happy, but it's kind of like, oh, it's so old and I can't upgrade it and I can't add to it. And it was always a challenge. And in my experience having that problem, I wanted a system where I could just kind of tack on a new piece and have it be backwards compatible. And there's some things that have evolved since that time frame. You have some standards like BACnet is a protocol in the industry for building automation controls. You have a lot of power management bus protocols that help manage that. But what's unique about LumenCache is it actually brings that not only to software and communications protocols, but even to hardware. Hardware cards that you plug in make sure that your technology is backwards compatible with the most basic functionality, and that is, power management, safety, and a little bit of energy management, meaning that the system can decide to turn off some pieces. And when you open the segment, you talked about the challenges that Texas just had with demand management. And so demand management is something that allows smaller batteries. So when your customers and friends are putting in these solar panel systems and they're saying, oh, I need to size it for my whole house to make it net zero. Well, that's hard. That's difficult to manage when you've got a party going on and you've got all the lights on and you're cooking and everything else. You'll drain your battery pretty quickly. And so, but for the most of the year, right, you're never using that much energy. Every day you're using only half of that, maybe or less. And so the ability for the homes or buildings to kind of assess what you use most often and automatically pull back demand, or if there's an event where the grid needs your help, right? So the Texas grid, for example, if they could pull back 10%, well, in that case, it was actually pretty big, but 10, 15% of the load, if it was able to be curtailed, that might have kept everything online. So, and that happens, by the way, daily. Summertime, perfect example. It's only about 6 to 10% that the grid needs to shed to keep blackouts from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the cost, obviously, the residual costs on blackouts is tremendous, from safety and, all kinds of people get hurt whenever there's a blackout. So, this putting this kind of technology in all the new homes is not only a good personal financial benefit because you're saving energy and you've got a more reliable system. It's simple, uses less copper, but you also get these other benefits of a more comfortable environment. Everyone else's lights are off and you're sitting there going, yeah, okay, my refrigerator's not running right now because the grid's off, but no big deal. It's going to stay cold for a couple hours.
Yeah, it's one thing to lose parts of your grid. It's another thing to lose your lighting. So let's get into some of the nitty gritties, Derek, of how this works. You know, um, So are you targeting new construction, or can this system be retrofitted in? And is it strictly residential or commercial or both?
Sure. So it's best for new construction, and the reason why is because it's wired differently. So if you've already got 110 Romex run around your house or building, really not practical because you can't use that. So, but in new construction, you have a choice. You can put in this different style of wire. And I remember when we were first starting to do this back in 2012, and builders were kind of like, "What? Oh, you want to change the wires in my house?" He's like, "How many jobs do you have? Come back to me in 3 years. If everyone's still happy, I'll put it in." So 8 years later now, it's great because we've got projects that have been running since 2012 and still reliable. In fact, a funny story, in Ohio, there was two wellness centers and six big apartment buildings. And I had called them up, the system owners, and I said, "Hey, we haven't chatted in a while. How's your system going?" And he says, "Oh, he goes, Derek, we put so many new technologies in that thing. We've had nothing but problems, except for LumenCache." He goes, your system is just, I don't have any issues with it. He goes, "We have a lot of power outages here. And so we drain the batteries. It was using these car batteries, these deep cycle marine batteries." He goes, "We had to replace a battery, but, 150 bucks down at Costco and we were done." So, it's nice to have those kinds of stories, but it does everything from residential. It's perfectly ideal for production homes, custom homes, because it is a control system. So it does dimming and interfaced with, nicer control systems, and light commercial. So any kind of 2x2s, 2x4s, 4-foot linear, garage lights, anything under 50 watts. So that's the key, is that we can put 50 watts across a Cat 5. You don't need Cat 6. It helps if you've got a bigger building and you want to have a more centrally located panel, but you can also distribute it. And so you can have, if you've got a bigger facility, you can have like two different panels, for example. They'll talk between each other just fine behind the scenes. And so it all gets synchronized together. And, the coolest thing is how you can add sensors to it. So, I was talking earlier about the control system background. And what was interesting when I first started in the industry of lighting was we used to spend about 150 bucks to buy a motion sensor. So for an office, by the time you bought the sensor, engineered it, installed it, overall cost was roughly about 150 bucks. And I'm like, there's no way that you can make a product cost that much now that LEDs are here, because we're using, a sixth, anywhere from a quarter to a sixth to an eighth of the amount of energy. So you'd have like a 25-year plus payback on a motion sensor. That doesn't make sense, right? So I'm like, how can I get sensors down to a dollar or two, you know, and and just kind of include them as a default. In other words, I don't know about you, but when I drive around, I see lights on in the middle of the day. It's kind of like, oh, why are we wasting this energy? I don't understand. There's so much intelligence in products now, and you still see it all the time with lights on. So that was a big driver behind making this product and getting the cost to be kind of a disruptive level, where we can just simply embed sensors into every light if we want, and make it where it's a dollar or two more on the street. And that, by the way, brings me to China, if you want me to answer that question.
Sure. I mean, I guess I just want to reflect on this whole technology thing and how these tipping points occur, because obviously 10 years ago LEDs were very expensive. It wasn't clear when the tipping point was going to happen, and then it happened. And now it's the odd facility that doesn't have LED lighting. It's still out there, but the majority of our built environment is lighted with LEDs now, all of a sudden, in the last 5 years. And so with the advent of your technology, the possibility of powering some critical infrastructure with DC power, avoiding that conversion or the multiple conversions, right? LEDs are fundamentally DC technology, right? And so it's better to just feed them DC power. Um, and so I guess before you tell the China story though, you have to have a battery in the picture here, right? Because you need a 12-volt source of power. And
We don't need a battery. You don't need one. In other words, you can just use a single AC DC adapter. But as a lot of your customers probably already have, they already have, a 48-volt battery in the system, right? And so we can tap into anywhere from 24 to 48-volt battery systems. And they range, by the way. So they'll go down to about 20 when they're discharged and up to about 58 usually on peak voltage. And so our driver doesn't care what voltage level comes in. It'll automatically be tuning those things about 250,000 times a second, actually, to maintain that perfect current level so that the lights aren't going to wink or flicker or wave or anything like that,
mhm.
regardless of what your solar panel chargers and your AC chargers are doing. It's all independent.
When you say people already have a 48-volt battery though, what are you referring to?
Oh, so a lot of the home solar packages have 48-volt batteries attached to them, and
Okay, you
so
mean like the power wall.
yeah, yeah. In fact, it's funny when Powerwall first came out, that was a DC tap, and then they very quickly switched over to AC inverters.
Mhm.
Just kind of, I think Elon was a little too early. you know, it's
Yeah.
like he kind of saw, yeah, we're going to be DC microgrids. He can go DC right into his charger, for example, and save that extra, 10 to 15%. When you consider power factor, by the way, so for your electricians that are on board here, and I was amazed. I've seen so many commercial projects where they said, look, these LEDs are 8 times more efficient, and so they put all new LEDs in the whole building, and then they only got 4 times efficiency
Mhm.
reduction. And they're like, I don't understand. Why is it, that we only save a quarter as opposed to, an 8x improvement? And it turns out it was power factor. All these little tiny capacitive drivers, they oftentimes don't put PFC in it, power factor correction. And so with LumenCache, the single AC/DC adapter has power factor correction built into it. And so you have a big savings right there. And that was actually part of the reason why I came to China here, by the way. It was a 5-year joint venture between the Department of Energy and China's Housing and Urban Development Department. And the study was the laboratories like Lawrence Berkeley Labs, they were tasked over the 5 years to determine how much more efficient is DC over AC, and can we be using this as a viable application inside of buildings? So not just at the grid level, but how do we bring it down into the buildings and gain efficiencies, cost savings, et cetera. So the first 4 years was all about quantifying that at the higher power levels, microgrid levels, inside buildings, building to building, et cetera. And then in the 5th year, which is right now, it was about the controls. So the ability to have controls over the top as a layer on top of the building DC systems and getting that right down to the loads. And that's where my product happens to apply perfectly. So I was the smallest company in this thing. You were talking about the trajectory of LumenCache. We were tiny, tiny company, and just struggling to get things going. And then now all of a sudden, be the combination of experience here in manufacturing, being able to produce the products at a disruptive price that every stakeholder in the chain, from distributors, dealers, et cetera, can make money and still provide a great price to the end user, the builder. I needed to leverage the capability and capacities of Shenzhen here. Now we do manufacture some of the pieces in the US, so the metal all comes from the US. All the steel comes from there, and so the parts are oftentimes assembled there. But you have to make electronics here to some degree. It's just kind of built for it here.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. So And for our listeners who don't know, which I did not know, I mean, I've heard of Shenzhen, but I didn't know where it was. It's a coastal city. It's a city of 18 million, which is there's like dozens of those size cities in China, right?
That's just
Um,
my community here, right, where you live.
and but you were saying it's a planned city, right? It was kind of built from scratch back in the 80s to be
Yeah,
what?
it's
What was
fascinating.
Shenzhen designed for?
It's fascinating. So Deng Xiaoping was the architect. They call him the architect of Shenzhen, and he was educated in Cambridge and Chinese national, and just saw the world, and it was such a great visionary about long-term thinking. And he just looked at this area and he says, okay, this is going to be the jewel of China's new city. And so I was actually really honored last year when they did the 40th anniversary of the city, 2 years ago, excuse me. They included me as one of the people who was in a big documentary about Shenzhen and the 40th anniversary. And my particular story was about being an entrepreneur, coming to this amazing city, and using and leveraging the infrastructure, the ecosystem of all the electronics development and manufacturing capacity. And also what they were most interested in is the fact that my team is also very diverse. So we had, someone from the UK, a Canadian, a Chinese, a US. I mean, we just had people from all around the world working together. And that was kind of the vision that Deng Xiaoping had seen for China, and that it wasn't just about the Chinese citizens and people here, but it was just also about kind of opening up China, which at the time you got to remember was not a big topic. It was, China was very quiet and sealed, and they've really just, they've got the long-term thinking thing down pat. There's thousands of years of history here, and they learn from it. I'm always impressed with the way their politicians have to go to school to become a politician. That's it's a very different experience than what we have. They argue, they discuss, but they're also, very much together. And so what you're seeing is the result of that. If you have a nice cohesive society that's working together, it's incredible what you can accomplish. And I think that it's hard to watch sometimes the things that go on in the U.S. in comparison. And I love the U.S. I mean, I miss it. I want to come back, and the COVID has been keeping me from traveling like I normally do. And the biggest frustration, I think, is when people look at China and they say, "Oh, you're evil, you're bad, you're trying to take over everything." It's like Chinese people don't think that way. They're kind of like, we have our land, we have our dirt, and we're fine here. We'll buy your cities. In other words, we have no trouble financially helping you, but they don't want to kind of invade and take over. That's not the way the culture works here. So I think it'd be kind of interesting, and I hope that people who've come and experienced this, and I would welcome anyone to come and experience this, by the way, especially if you're in a technology field, come to China for a little while, even just come for vacation. It's really cool. For the first time, I got to see the Great Wall and the Forbidden City. I've been here for 4 years. I hadn't seen it yet. And I've traveled to Beijing. I've traveled to those areas for business, but I never got around. So it was kind of fun to experience that side of it. But from a technology perspective, this place was almost engineered to do this, to build products and things.
Hmm, very cool. So, how do you see this playing out? Um, you know, I have a microgrid on wheels called an RV, which so I've been learning about DC power and the value of batteries. I don't have a battery in my garage. I don't have solar on my roof, and maybe someday, but I'm happy to have my microgrid on wheels. And um, but like we saw with the LED revolution that kind of swept the lighting world, there is, I think, a revolution to be had in potential power systems converting to DC or splitting. Maybe we'll never do away with AC in buildings, but there's a lot of stuff that can run on DC. What are the barriers that, other than tradition, and the building trades are not known for changing products easily, so that, I get that there is that just entrenchment and the installers not wanting to try new products. But as you see it strategically, I mean, you're 10 years into your LumenCache venture now. How's that going? Where are you getting traction, and where do you see the opportunity, so to speak?
Yeah. The CEO of Idea Labs did a study of all of their startups, and he was looking for what was the most important success factor. Was it the team? Was it the technology? Was it timing? Was it money? And he found timing to be the most important success factor in a company. So my timing was perfect. It was just 6 or 8 years too early. Uh, so, so, and it was funny. I talked with an attorney friend who had seen me and met me in 2016, and when we talked this week, he's like, "Wow, it's amazing to see like how steady you are. That you're doing the exact vision you told me about, 5 years ago." And I did nail that. So the vision of what was going to happen in the industry, how it was, all of those predictions were accurate. I was definitely early as far as how quickly the market was going to change. And as you said about LEDs, we can show how much better they are and everything, but it takes time. And what I've learned over the years is power is literally the foundation of our modern society. Whether that power comes through oil, right? So it was originally trees, the US, and then it was, well, before it was the US, it was North America. And so, it was trees, then it was oil, and then it was electricity. But the real revolution occurred in the power system, and it's 125 years old. So think about how deep that is into the DNA of technology for everything that we do. So to try and change that definitely requires some pretty strong influence. And the best analogy I can give is USB, right? We all charge our devices by this plug. Nobody told us to, right? It just happened. And so even on the other side of the Apple plug, because Apple had a different connector on their phone, but it was always that USB-A on the other side. So in some ways, I've taken all of these lessons learned through history and I'm trying to apply them. How much of a system should be open? How much should be closed? Apple was a closed system, very successful. Android is an open system and successful. So there's a combination of those things. In buildings, you have compatibility that needs to be met, like BACnet, which made all of those systems interoperable. But now hardware and IoT has made that much more complex and complicated. So we've got a combination of things that all had to come together. This particular product is right now at the right time. So what I did was we modified the original prototype, which had been running for so many years in the buildings, and we just fixed the bugs in it. So we fixed a few of the design challenges, and then we released that as a product. The biggest challenge I had after the technical problems was in inventory. In other words, we have 60 SKUs now, 60 parts, everything from different kinds of light fixtures to all the little pieces and modules that go into the system. And in China, in Shenzhen in particular, they don't speak English, they don't speak Mandarin, they speak volume, right? So I have to buy everything in these huge volumes, and it's a business challenge to get around. So we got some help 2 years ago, and so now we've got great product flow. We've got all the things, all the roadblocks are covered. So it's kind of a perfect time for your podcast too. That's why I'm a little bit more public about the company and mentioning what we do, because we can now take on that new load. Even the training systems are just coming on board now, where you'll be able to walk through the education process. It's kind of cool. Like, it takes an electrician how many years to become proficient? Because electricians have to maintain the safety. And you can an electrician poorly designing or installing a system in a home can burn it down, right? But LumenCache is actually designed in the factory. So it's more like an automobile where the whole system is designed to restrict an overload. It doesn't matter how you install it. If you install it poorly or incorrectly, it just won't work, but it's not going to burn the house down. So that also results in a change in how, what kind of trades can use this. And, does it require electricians or not? A lot of electrician lobbies have been pushing to say like anything low voltage, anything above 12 volts, electricians got to install. And then you got the Cisco union, as I call it, saying, wait a minute, power over Ethernet. You're telling me they can't plug in their network equipment, their computer? And the electricians are really needed in another area right now. Solar panels and those kind of products going in everywhere desperately needs the electricians because that's still using a high voltage, high power system that requires years of experience before you should be installing those things. And then you've got LumenCache, for example, that it's about an 8-hour process of learning to get really good proficiency. So if you want to get into this, if you're a low voltage installer or an electrician and you want to train your team up for this new product, 8 hours of training is great, right? I mean, that's really quick, fast learning curve.
So penetration, timing, do you feel like things are happening now? I mean, you said you were 6 years too early, so you're 4 years into actual traction, and um, yeah, I mean, construction is booming in North America. What
Yeah.
you know, who is it that's checking out LumenCache, and how can people get a hold of your product?
So the best way to contact us is, of course, the lumencache.com. So that's lumencache.com. There's a contact us page there. If you want to see a little bit more about the product technology, there's the B2B site that the dealers and distributors use that has all the technical information also, and that's orders.lumencache.com. Um, but the best way is just start there, and then our sales will contact you and kind of walk you through the process. I apologize that the two new websites for the system are not finished. We have a new lumencache.com and a new lumencache.lighting so that we can explain to customers just how easy this is. Everything just kind of clicks together, right? Like when you install a light switch, it looks just like a regular Decora light switch, but it's just a Cat5 jack on the back. That's it. It's very simple to plug together everything. But that technical information is there. And as far as the types of customers, it's kind of fun. I'm not in touch with everyone because we sell through a distribution channel, but sometimes there's interesting projects. So there's one that's starting up now in Hawaii that's really cool because the developer is like fully on board everything DC. You were talking about appliances, everything he wants DC, and they're finally available. And it's not that they weren't available in the last 3 to 5 years, but they were crazy expensive. So now all of those kinds of products have come down in price that it makes it practical. And then it scales from there to tiny home. There's production homes. So we've got a couple of new design tools using Visio that makes this really fast. My own experiences, like a lot of dealers have talked with me and they said like, boy, you really know how to install products, not just make them, but install them. And I'm like, I was an integrator for years. And so, every experience you've ever gone through, whether it was frustration with the technical side of a product or the installation side of it or the ordering side, all of those things I experienced. And so I'm as empathetic as we can be as far as making sure that the learning curve is quick. Like the builders, for example, have a real benefit from this because the trim phase on a construction project, right? That's the hard time because all the trades are starting to come together at once. The building envelope is sealed up and everybody's tripping over each other on the inside of the building. And what's cool about LumenCache is that it shortens that time frame quite a bit because you can just kind of go click, click, throw it in, and then you're in and out and you've got lights early. And because they're low voltage, with the UL 2108 sticker on it, the electrician, an electrical inspector can usually activate it early. That means you don't have to have the Christmas lights in the building for the construction lights. You can use the production lights for that. Um, just all kinds of benefits, one after another. And a lot of it's based on my own experiences being an integrator and trying to speed up the process. And we haven't even touched on things like, controlling it through your phone and with other systems. But it can start off really easy and as dumb as an existing AC system. So, some builders, for example, most builders actually say, like, I don't want any technology. I don't want to have service calls or callbacks. If the customer wants to add those automated switches later on, I'll let them do it and they'll take out the old switches and rewire it. But that's a pain. It'd be like a car dealer saying, well, I'm not going to sell you anti-lock brakes and automatic steering. You got to put that in aftermarket because I don't want to deal with the warranty on it. So in a lot of ways, LumenCache helps that problem because the homeowner or building owner can buy a simple on-off system from the building owner, the builder, but then they can just go into the closet and like boop boop change something out, and then all of a sudden they've got dimming or even just change a setting on it, and you got these advanced features. And so like every stakeholder in the chain is satisfied with that.
That's cool.
Hmm.
I Is there anything else that we should discuss? I don't know what I don't know, Derek. So I really rely on you to enlighten us. If there's particular topics that you wanted to bring to the audience, I'm happy to go a little longer, or we can call it a day.
Well, the clean power hour, when I first met you and you had asked about this, I always look at what's your core audience and what do you guys do. um, I had always thought, okay, so I have three sons and I want them to live in a clean environment. Turns out everybody does. Uh, you know,
Yep.
it's not to say that we're not faced with the challenges every day of those decisions, right? In other words, we still say, oh, it's like I really want to live a clean environment and things like that, but I can't afford a Tesla right now. And so I'm going to have to buy this, Hyundai Elantra, whatever it is. It's a gas car, even though I know gasoline stations are going to go away in 10 years and it's not going to be worth crap resale value. But, but those are real life decisions that we all have to make. And so what I found is that sometimes you can make tiny influences that will help it make your decision much easier. Um, so one of the things I thought about was like, how quickly can we get solar panels on every roof, right? How do we do that? How do we get people to put solar panels and batteries in so that they have that stability in their life, but not require them to buy a 5 or 10 or 12 kilowatt system, right? What if we can just put a 1 kilowatt system in, just 3 panels, 2 panels, even 600 watts? That's enough to power all of your USB charging for your cell phones, your network router and switch, and all of your lights and your exhaust fans. And if you're building a passive house, the passive house, is a stable envelope that doesn't lose a lot of heat. So all it needs is really good ventilation. So we can power the ventilation fans through this DC infrastructure. And so, what I was hoping to do was to create an attractive product that makes your life better on the inside. And then that says, oh, well, if I have solar panels and a battery, if I just tack that on, now I'm producing my own clean energy. So, it's almost like the opposite way of thinking about it. Instead of saying, oh, I want to put power on and then I'm going to get benefits from it, it's thinking, oh, I get benefits from the system and I can tack on the power, the solar panels, and have a draw for that. And the best part is like, if you don't have a grid connected solar, your soft costs go down significantly, right? I mean, what is it, like 30% of the solar installs nowadays, the cost is in permitting, grid tie connection. So, putting up a little tiny package on the roof saves all that energy and money. So you can really put a small system in. And then I think what's going to happen and what I've seen happen is people put a small system in and then 5 years later, they're like, I want to do my roof. I want to be totally off grid. I'm stoked about this thing. So, for your customer and podcast, and you know, I'm sure that they would love to have that, thousands and thousands of customers experiencing a little taste of solar and getting that good taste in their mouth, and like, this was cool, and I didn't get hurt by this. It wasn't uncomfortable. The experience was nice. Let me scale it up now. I want to do this, and then I want to plug in my car. And then by that time, the vehicle to grids thing will all be ready, and it's all going to be DC eventually. So not now, not for about 20, 30 years, by the way. Yeah, just to give you some time frame. It was my own estimate on time frames. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm ready to, see the next wave of innovation hit the green building arena. We have the technology for solar storage, DC lighting. A lot of our electronics are DC powered. We're converting AC to DC to power those devices. Why not just go DC solar to DC uh, power
Yeah.
in your electronics, right?
Plus it's my initials.
Yes, it
DC.
is.
Yeah, we laugh because my sister's initials are AC and my father's initials are FCC.
That's funny. Well, hey, I want to make a couple of announcements before we let you go, Derek. The Solar Podcast and the Clean Power Hour that we do every Wednesday with John Weaver are all available here at our website at cesnrg.com/podcast. You can also reach out to me at TG Montague on Twitter. And we're bringing you 2 interviews a week, like Tom Tansey that we just posted today, talking about cybersecurity and communications. Tom is the founder and executive director of Sunspec Alliance, a thought leading organization, really uh, for all kinds of solar communications and standards. Also, bringing you thought leaders like Rewiring America and Sam Kalish, talking about how we can get to a 90% clean grid by 2035. It's totally doable. And Rewiring America shows us how. So check us out at cesnrg.com. I mentioned the Clean Power Hour. John Weaver and I, who is a journalist for PV Magazine, break down the latest in solar storage and renewable energy news every Wednesday, bringing you all kinds of news about technology and events like zero emissions tankers, like the Ingenuity lander that just landed on Mars and has a solar powered helicopter on board. So check us out there. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and by all means, make comments. We love to hear from our listeners. I want to thank Derek Cowburn, the founder and CEO of LumenCache, for coming on the show today. Derek, I really wish you the best of success. And if there's anything we can do for you here at Continental, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.
Thank you very much, Tim. And there will be no AC power on Mars.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that prediction. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.